let's get started. I'm going to try something new today where I extend my screen over to these. Bear with me as I do that because it's slightly different than what we've done before, but that way I can have my notes right here, which hopefully leads to a slightly better experience for you. Okay. Cool. Right. All right, so let's talk a little bit about further forms of navigation in SwiftUI. So you'll recall last time we talked, I think, about primarily the sort of primary way of using navigation destination, that modifier, for navigation. There are a few other kinds of navigation you can do, however. There is one that utilizes a destination view within the navigation link itself. And then there's two other navigation destination modifiers that we'll take a look at. So let's go ahead and get ourselves set up to navigate somewhere. And then there's, of course, navigation path, which is a whole other ball of wax. So let's go ahead and get started. First, let's delete all this, right? We're going to create just a list of strings to start with. That we will then display as, a list of strings. We will do a list of animals. Like so. And then we will create a list. Items, ID, self, because it's a string. Like that. And then we will create some text, and that will have item within it. Oh, item in. There we go. Okay, so now we should get a list over here of our different strings, and it looks like so. Cool. This is kind of your most basic thing you do in iOS, right, is lists of things. And that's good because it's very easy to do it in SwiftUI. So now we want to make it so that when you click on one of these, it acts as a link and it takes us to a screen that has more information, right? In order to do that, we need to wrap this in a navigation stack, as discussed before, right? Like so. And then we change this text item into a navigation link, right? This is true for almost every form of navigation that exists thus far that we've looked at and will be looking at today. The only kind where this isn't exactly how you'd set it up, where you don't use navigation link really at all, is something called navigation path, which we'll look at in a bit. So navigation link basically has a few different overloads, things that you can do. The one that we were using last time was this one, title key and value. And here you could, for example, use the item for both the key and the value. So the key is what gets displayed to the user, and it just has a default way of doing that with text. And then the value is what gets sent up to the navigation stack, and the navigation stack says, I know what to do with this because I know that there's a navigation destination for that type, right? And in this case, that would be string because that is the type that item has, right? So this would be something like this. There's your basic navigation. It takes you to a new screen, right? And basically it treats this block as a whole brand new block, just like this body block, but just for a different view. And so it just puts cats right in the center there. Okay, cool. So this is what we've seen so far. There are a couple of other overloads for navigation destination that we can take a look at. So one of them is this item destination, right? So this one basically operates by saying, I'm going to watch a particular item, and if that item's value gets set, then I will go to that place. Okay. So, for example, here we would say have a selected item property that doesn't have anything, right? And then here we would create a binding to that property using $, get money, get paid. And we do our completion block in the same way, where this text is going to be passed in. That's basically, our item here. And what's it complaining about now? Oh, right. Sorry. It's not supposed to be an empty string. It's supposed to be empty. So it should be, for this type of navigation destination, your state variable needs to be optional, okay? And then you can do the same thing, right? And so now when we click on snakes, nothing happens because we're using navigation link, right? So rather than navigation link, we would set up a button with an action and a label. Our action for the button would be to change the value in selected item to item, which is being passed into our list block here, right? And then our code, let's get rid of this, make it nice. Our label would just be, again, this is just how we want to display it, right? So we just show text right now, right? Interestingly enough, this gets, turned into this kind of, they look like this now instead, just because they are, it's a button instead of a navigation link, which is kind of interesting. You can, if you want, wrap this further in a navigation link, like this, right? Now we'll just put this here. And you'll still get that. I believe you'll still get that blue highlight. Yeah, but at least you get the disclosure indicator now, right? Although it doesn't do anything, so maybe that's not right. Hold on. Let's go ahead and just look at this. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I think the navigation link messes with it. I'm not entirely sure. I'm pretty sure there's a way to get a disclosure indicator here, but we're not going to look too closely at that because that's one of those fiddly, what I would call a fit and finish thing, which is something that I'm going to be referring to in the final project description, which I will be sharing with you at the end of class today. And you want to make sure, especially with SwiftUI, as you're working on your final project, that you get all of your workflows and the way that your data is set up finished before you mess around with what I would call fit and finish, right? So if you want this, this is nice, but I don't want it to be blue, and I want it to have a disclosure indicator, but I prefer this way of doing it, right? Just leave it as is to start with, and then come back and fix it later, right? Start working on the next view. That's the best way to prioritize your work for the final project. Okay, so you click on snakes, you get snakes, okay? You click on rabbits, you get rabbits. Great, because it's hooked up, it's watching this particular item value, right? Great, cool. Okay, so next up, the other type of navigation destination that exists, destination, is this isPresented one, okay? So isPresented is something you'll see a lot in a bunch of places. Oop, that's weird. Yeah, whatever. There we go. Okay. This is a pattern that you'll see in a lot of places in SwiftUI. And it is a pattern that they are not exactly trying to phase out, but they are moving away from the isPresented pattern, generally speaking, just because it leads to having a lot of Boolean flags everywhere in your code, which is what some people call a code smell. A code smell isn't a bad idea or something that you shouldn't do necessarily, but it is something that when you see it, you should sniff it because it's a code smell. So you should, if you see something that's considered a code smell, you do a double take. You say, whoa, wait, should we really do it this way? That's what a code smell is. So having a lot of Boolean flags all over your code everywhere, that's a code smell. So try to avoid it. Or think about it before you do it. Anyway, the point though is that navigation destination is presented, and we can, I guess it doesn't know what to do with it because there's an error. But if we go back to, actually doing it, right, is presented here. It takes a binding on a Boolean value, right? So this is just a Boolean value that, like, if it gets set to true, then then whatever this is, whatever the view is, gets pushed, okay? So it's not necessarily appropriate for lists like this, where we're trying to pass information along. However, it's not inappropriate for lists necessarily, right? Because as you'll see here, we are going to be able to pass a selected item such as this along. So if we go to state var, and then we can just say item tapped, right, equals false, okay? And then we do a binding to it, such as this, right? We can now use our selected text or selected item like so. And this one, we don't want it to be optional now. And in fact, it doesn't even need to be state because we're not needing to change it. No, sorry, that's not true. We are changing it right here. That's right. So it is state still. And then we want to give it a default starting value. Okay, so now we get this, here. Now clicking still isn't going to do anything because we're never setting item tapped to true. So you can do that in here in your action block for button where you can do actual code, right? So we can say item tapped dot toggle, right, to switch it between true and false, whatever it is. So yeah. So we can go, now we can, once again, we can go to snakes, and we can go to rabbits, and so on and so forth. Now, a few of you might be looking at this and wondering, okay, wait, now, but hold on, Professor Dan, because this item tapped state variable is set to true when we leave to the next screen, right? Which means when we come back, it should still be true, right? And the reason why it's getting set back to false when you hit back here is because we have set it as a binding here in is presented, okay? Navigation destination, oop, not trying to drag that. Navigation destination is presented takes in a binding of a Boolean so that when we leave whatever we were presenting, when we backtrack and come back to this screen, it can set that Boolean back to false. So that we can then, once again, use toggle, or if you want to be, really simple, you can use item tapped equals true, because we never really need it to go from like true to false, which is what toggle would also do if it was true, right? So, yeah. Anyway, okay. Any questions about these two other forms of navigation destination before we start looking at the other two ways of doing it, which is pure navigation link and then navigation path? Cool. Okay. I think we might have looked a little bit at a pure navigation link last time, but we're going to just look at it a little bit closer here, and then we'll look at navigation path. So one thing when you're making navigation link that you can do, and we did, I believe, talk about this a little. There are a bunch of deprecated, like a bunch of, they have this like little warning sign, right? They have a ton of deprecated compilers for this because they've been trying to figure out how to make navigation work for SwiftUI for a long time, right? Don't use any of the deprecated ones. But if you look at this one here, this navigation value, title key value and value label, both, put a value out onto the stack, and then the stack hopefully has a navigation destination that matches with that value, right? Those both work with the first kind of navigation destination that we looked at. Title key destination or destination view label or destination label, these two kinds of navigation links use just creating the view right here, right? So, for example, if we do this, then this accomplishes the same thing. Now, the reason why this is not necessarily always preferred is just because Sometimes you want to be able to not have to keep nesting things the further and further you get in your code, right? So yeah, but it's a perfectly fine way to do navigation, and it is much simpler to wrap your head around than the navigation destination stuff is. Those are a little bit more advanced, but that's because they cover a few more cases that you might want, right? So this is your simplest way of doing it. Navigation destination is the slightly more complicated way of doing it. And then navigation path, which we're going to look at next, is the most complicated way to do it. So any questions about navigation link? And there is another overload of this, of course, where you do this, right? And then, then you can have your, just to show the distinction, like that. Right, and so now, they're all red, right? But they're only red here in the label, not in the view getting pushed onto the stack, right? Because that's this one, not this one. Okay, cool. Any questions about navigation link and destination for navigation link? Awesome, cool. Very simple stuff. Okay, so now let's take a look at navigation path. So navigation path is a way to do something that's called routing. Routing is a concept that exists in applications such as, like, for iPhone or Android, like mobile apps, because of the need to be able to link to a specific page within the application from the web. So if you've ever been in in your browser and you click on a link that goes to open up, and it opens up one of your applications that you have installed, it might take you to a specific place within that in that application. And the way that's done is using a concept called routing. This is also something that gets used on websites. Routing is essentially how they determine what to show you and where links go when your URL is a particular thing, right? So if the URL is apple.com/docs/Swift, it shows you this page. If it's apple.com/docs/Objective-C, it shows you this other page that no one looks at anymore, right? So routing exists primarily for that. The big kind of like the term that you will hear for the idea of being able to go create links, like hyperlinks that you can click on and go deeply into some particular screen in an application on iOS, is called deep linking. That's what the term is. So if you see people talk about deep linking, they're talking about setting up a routing system in an app such that it can receive a deep link as an option and then say, I know which view to go to. It's to this one, right? That's kind of the main primary purpose of routing. The other purpose for routing is to kind of decouple your views. So right now, you'll know a lot of the views that we are building, and I've shown you so far, they're all heavily nested within each other. They kind of directly refer to each other, right? Like they're all kind of in one Matryoshka doll, right? Like just inside of each other like that, right? It's considered best practice in programming, typically, to not have things quite so tightly tied together in that way. Programmers looking at that, who are thinking in terms of scaling and having many features and stuff, they look at that and they say, that's not ideal. It would be great if instead what we could do is have, a bunch of views that are sort of separate from each other, not directly referred to by each other, but get referred to by something else. And that way, if we update to a new version, we don't have to worry about recompiling a bunch of the existing stuff. We can just change, we just route to a different location, right? So that's the other reason to do it. It helps decouple your views from each other. So what is routing and navigation path? Well, we can take a look at that. So One key thing to remember here is the idea of tying particular types of objects or pieces of data to particular views. That kind of first form of navigation destination that we looked at is very similar to what's going to happen here with the routing. So to start with, where are we going? Hello? Okay. Right. So to start with, we'll need to have a variable that keeps track of our kind of navigation, the current stack for our navigation. Okay, so currently this is all being handled in the background by SwiftUI. What we're going to do is going to give us direct control of the navigation stack so that we can push and pop views off of it manually whenever we want, rather than just relying on navigation links and the user hitting the back button, right? So to start with, we will call this, we'll just call this nav stack. To start with, we're going to just simply use an array of strings, very similar to our items here. And that's, that's okay, right? So we'll make that empty, right? And then here, there's this root one, of course, which is what we're using. However, there's also this path, binding navigation path, root, blah, 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 right? So in this one, you create a binding to a variable, or a property, if you will. Right, it's not called path, it's called navstack, right? And this now will essentially make it so that when you click on a navigation link with a value, it will take that value and add it to this array, okay? So we'll take a look really quickly at what that looks like without navigation, and then we'll take a look at like navigating with it, right? So if you go to here and we do navigation link, title key, blah, 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 value hashable, right? So this one will, once again, we'll do item, right? Very simple, okay? So now that we've done this, right, I'm sorry, we're not using navigation link. I'm getting myself all twisted around. We're going to use a button. Sorry. So we've got our button here with our action and everything, right? This label is going to be just the item text, okay? Once again, right? Here, now, there's a couple things we want to do. First of all, we're going to just add something to the navigation stack, okay? And we'll just add the item, right? And then we'll print out the navigation stack, right? Like so. Okay. So now when we click on a button, right, we can see that snakes has been added to the navigation stack, right? And it navigated, okay? However, there is this little kind of warning icon thing, and let me see if I can like zoom it in. Yeah, there it is, right? That's because it can't find a view type for that value, right? Okay, so again, this is one of those things where we're going to need to look at having a navigation destination for this type of object, right? It's very similar to using a navigation link. However, now you can use buttons or toggles or do it completely programmatically. You can have it happen when you finish downloading something in the background, then you just navigate somewhere brand new and completely confuse the user, right? Don't do that. That's a bad idea. But sometimes your product managers will ask you to do it, and you'll say, no, that's terrible. And they'll say, too bad, we got approval from the VP already, and I don't want to have that conversation again, so just do it, and we'll fix it afterwards in production. And then it never gets fixed, and you end up with apps like Amazon, okay, which are just disasters in terms of UX, right? So, a little industry anecdotes there, I guess. So now, once again, we can do this kind of, text, right? And now it knows where to go, right? Now, the fun thing that you can do here, right, is if we create a sort of, new type of view, right? Let's call this just nav button, right? It's got a body, like so, right? And it's going to have a variable text, which is the string, okay? Right, like so, right? Oh, I guess it won't have the nav stack, will it? How do we, there's a way to get access to that. I can't remember what it is. Okay, sorry. So ignore that whole idea there, because I'm not going to figure that out live in front of you guys. That's a disaster, right? Let's just copy and paste it for now. This is a terrible idea, but whatever. It is something that you will occasionally need to do, okay? Now, what we're doing here is making it so that you can perpetually just get more and more snakes in your path over and over again. So first you can click on snakes, and you can see we printed snakes. And then if you click on snakes again, we have snakes, right? Snakes, right? And each of these is getting pushed onto the navigation path, or onto the navigation stack, right? And, as you can see, right, snakes is, we're kind of coming backwards here. We're popping everything off of that stack over and over again, and now we're back to having just snakes on it one time, right? So each time we go, we're pushing something new, and there's another back button to it, right? This is very, very useful for being able to do what's called programmatic navigation. Basically, in some portion of your code, you want to be able to just say, oh, okay, cool, just push this view immediately, right? Without having to have a navigation link that a user clicks on, right? You want to be able to have it happen somewhere else, right? Like, for example, if we wanted to, we could put it on, where is it? This one in here. We could put it on .onAppear, right? And so in onAppear, we could say navstack.append, and then, right? Excuse me, right? Like so, okay? And once again, this is appending a string. This string is then getting sent here, right? And so this view is what's getting shown, which is a button that will, once again, add more ha-has to the stack, right? So we can just stack things more and more on top of each other as needed, okay? And you can have stuff happen like this, okay? You can also now in your constructor for this view, you can now pass in the nav stack if you want it to be in a particular configuration. So here we can say rabbits, snakes, chipmunks, oh my, right? And now you'll see we have this oh my, right? Back chipmunks, snakes, rabbits, and then we're back here, right? So now any views that are displaying your view have deeper control over its navigation stack as well. And that's how you can do deep linking, right? By pushing stuff onto the stack and doing it in an order that you want to set up so that when the user hits back, it takes them back to certain screens in a particular order. Okay, any questions about navigation stack path? And using path to modify the navigation stack and change stuff on it. Yeah, what's up?
So if we happen to go very, very nested, and then let's say they finally do the thing we want them to do, and we want to pop them all the way back up, we just clear the entire stack, bring them back.
Yes.
And then if we wanted to bring them halfway, then there's a bit of processing that we have to do to check like.
Yep. Yeah, and so just for the recording, to answer the question, or repeat the question, if we are deeply, deeply nested and we want to be able to just go all the way back along the nav stack, then in order to do that, what we can do is we pass the nav stack down as a binding to each thing, right? and then we can wipe the whole nav stack out, just set it to empty, and it pops all the way back to the root of the navigation stack. And if we wanted to go like halfway or to a particular location, we could do some processing and then just remove the things from the navigation stack that we want to remove, and it'll take us back there. So yeah, cool. Awesome. And yeah, actually we could probably do that here.
Please click the buttons I want to see what will show. Okay, which button you click?
I clicked on rabbits here.
Oh, so how about the others?
So if I click on snakes, it will show us snakes.
Okay.
Yeah. And if I click on dogs, it'll show dogs.
And how about continue clicking?
If I keep clicking, it'll just keep pushing more and more dogs onto the stack.
Oh,
Currently.
So that is only for the snacks.
This is just for when you first look at the view. So when you first come to the view, right? Just, when it gets created, right? And this preview here, it resets whenever you like make a change, right? So if we do this and then we do this, right? And then we save. I guess it knows that there wasn't a difference. Wow, that's cheeky. Is there a refresh button anywhere? I don't remember. No, I don't think so. I mean, we could just, I guess, we just change this to be .font .headline like that or whatever, right? And so now it should refresh at some point. Yes, it did. Oh, I think it might have refreshed a couple times and I just didn't notice, right? It's just so fast. So now that it's refreshed, you'll see the stack we're at oh my, and then chipmunks, right? Then snakes, and then rabbits, right? But that's only when first coming to this view, and only if you pass that stack into the view when you create it, right? Which, we don't have to do necessarily. And then, yeah, we could also make it so that this button instead wipes out the nav stack, right? So remove all, like so, right? So now when we go here and we click oh my, it'll take us all the way back to the very top. Cool. Okay. That's navigation path and whatnot. Next up are tabs. So I'm going to try and shoehorn tabs in here really fast. Navigation stack is something that you tend to do, within a single tab. And by tabs, I'm talking about those bars that kind of show up on the bottom of the phone right here. And then you click on one and then you have a bunch of content, right? And then you go through things. A typical iPhone app's structure is that they have a few tabs, maybe 3 to 5, no more really than 5 is what Apple recommends. And then within each tab, you will probably have a navigation stack and different kind of workflows that you can go through in that tab, okay? So in order to build a tab sort of setup, right, we can go and we can look at, of course it shows me table before tab, which is just wild to me, but whatever, right? So you have this tab with content, there's role and all this other stuff, but you can just start with content to start with, right? So if you create this tab content, okay, and it's gonna fail because it's being, it's like, wait, what are we doing here? What's the deal, right? So this isn't conforming to view right now because it doesn't have any views in it, right? What is it, item? No, is it just tab? Oh, what's the, hold on, let me just double check something in my little notebook over here, just because this is one of those the names are so similar to each other, but I can't ever remember exactly off the top of my head. It's tab view. Yeah. Whoop. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry. So the outer one is tab view, right? So first you have a tab view, and then within each tab view, and you'll notice it's being really weird right now, right? You've got this, you can see the tab here, right? And then down here there's a navigation stack. That's because it's trying to show both a tab view and a navigation stack on the same screen and give them equal amounts of space. So this is, don't do this. This is a terrible pattern. But it's just there while we're setting this up, right? So now within a tab view, now you can create a tab, right? And again, table shows first for some reason, as this tab view. So here we have this, role, content, value, blah, 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 right? So we can just kind of start out with this, title key, image, content. This one's, kind of your bread and butter. You can also use role content label is another one that's not terrible, right? Or content label, that's also good. So let's take a look, right? So let's look at roles. So tab roles are, there's a few of them, right? But not many. But like if you do like search, for example, right? And then you say text, hello, just to get it like to compile, right? There's now there's a search right there, okay? And it's kind of, I wish that I could like zoom this in better, right? So now it's a search bar here and it says hello here, okay? What's in this view, what's in this content section is what gets displayed, okay? So we really want to display our navigation stack in there, right? So we can do this. And now this looks a little bit more like you would expect a standard iOS application to look. And now I can't quite tell because my angle's off. Is there a different color for the tab bar down there, or are my eyes like failing me? Can you guys see? I can't tell from this angle. No? Okay. Yeah, it's the same color? There's no like bar separator? Okay, whatever. That's fine. So, and that could have to do with the fact that we're using role, right? So another kind of tab that you can set up is, why does it immediately go to only content? That's so annoying. It's just a content one, right? So it's just content, okay? Like so, right? Delete some of that, put that there, okay, right? But because this is only content in the tab, there's no actual button, right? It needs some information for the button, okay? So frequently, you will want to use an image, right? Or a system image, more likely. System images are great. They have hundreds of them, and you can use them pretty well. So let's go ahead and do system image, okay? And then we'll take a look at some system images. And then we can also have a title, and this will just be animals, like so, right? So now for system image, there is a particular program that you should be able to get that is called SF Symbols Beta App. I don't know why it's still a beta. I think it's been out for like 2 or 3 years, but that's what they call it. See if you can find and download this. It is really helpful. I think I've shown it and we've used it a few times so far. But this is it. This is what it looks like. It has 6,195 symbols that are free for you to use in any iOS app anywhere, because Apple wants developers building iOS apps, okay? So you can use these and access them just by calling the name of it, like the text name of it, in system image. Anything that takes a system image, you can just use this, right? So here we've got animals. So let's see if we can find an animal. No. Okay, what about a dog? Okay, here's a dog. Maybe we prefer a cat. I like cats. And tab bar items down here, they typically don't have this kind of circle look to them, right? So they're usually kind of these, more solid or hollow versions, right? So here we've got a cat. Let's just go ahead and say cat, like that, right? And it actually fills it in, interestingly enough, like for you. It makes sure that your style is correct for a tab bar button, right? Which is filled. So, cool. And then it says animals down there in the tiny, tiny, impossible to read text, right? And I'll zoom in and go over here like this, right? So you can see now here we've got our tabs, and it says animals, and it's all, you'll note, above the safe area here where you currently use to access the swipe up, right? In order to do things. Okay, Cool. So we have our tab for animals. Great. Okay. So now let's go ahead and let's create a new tab. Okay, and we will call this one foods. All right, very, very inspired. I really do appreciate all the awards that I will be getting for my application. I'd like to thank my mother and my father for raising me right, etc. So now, I should have stayed in the interaction view. So now we can see here we have this new foods tab. But because it doesn't have anything in it, it's grayed out, and there's no icon because turns out there is no food icon in SF Symbols. Not called food anyway. There is this carrot or a cake. What do you guys think? Carrot or cake for food? I feel like the carrot is like better for food, but the cake is more fun. So we're gonna go with the cake. But if you're building an app, go with the carrot. You know what I mean? So that was just, I think it was just cake, right? No, it's birthday cake. Birthday cake. Birthday dot cake. There we go. Okay, there it is. Still grayed out, right? Because there's nothing to do here. But, so now here we can have our own other navigation stack, okay? And this one can have its own path and do all of its own things. Now, typically, for a lot of this stuff, you're going to be, instead of doing it all inline like this, you're going to create your own new custom views within their own files and then just refer to them, pass your data down into them that's necessary for that particular view, and so on and so forth. I'm doing it like this here because it's much easier for demoing very quickly to you. Cool. So this is the tab bar, here we have our navigation stack. I'll just add text, food is good, like this, and so now we can go back here to the interaction one. We can go to the show me the whole thing, and now we click on this, and you'll note that the back button is gone because currently we're on a root view, right? And all that stuff. Interestingly enough, if you made this a navigation link, right? Food is good, right? And we pass in a string that's called food or something like that, right? This navigation destination here does not work, right? Because this navigation destination is defined within this navigation stack. So it's only valid for this navigation stack, not for any other navigation stack. For every other navigation stack, you need to define a different destination for that type of value, right? String.self, destination, text, and then here we'll just make it, just text, right? And we'll make it red. What is it? Foreground style dot red, just to help show. Oh, spelling errors. There we go. So now when we go over here, we click this button. It now pushes this, and now there's this just text here that says food because that's the value that we passed. Cool. Any questions about tab views and tabs inside of tab views? They're pretty simple to set up, but they have a lot of further customization you can do that you'll be able to dive into for fun, in the final project if you want. Cool. Okay, we are now going to be on our quick 10-minute break. Next up, we're going to be looking at list searching and filtering and doing alerts and modal sheets. So, see you all in 10 minutes.